Ethan Carter got into a car accident on his way to congratulate Madeline Brooks on her divorce. His body suffered no severe injuries, only a head trauma. When he woke up, I realized he had lost his memory. He remembered everyone, his parents, his childhood best friend, his colleagues at work. The only person missing from his memories was me, his wife. Madeline sat beside his bed, tears streaming down her face, her delicate fingers clutching his hand. Her sobs were heart-wrenching, filled with emotion as if she had lost the most important person in her life. Ethan, despite his confused state, reached out and patted her hand gently, reassuringly, whispering, "Don't cry, Maddie. I'm okay." I stood at the side of the room, quietly skimming excess oil off the chicken soup I had made for him, making sure it wasn't too greasy for his stomach. The warm aroma filled the hospital room, but neither Ethan nor Madeline noticed. I wasn't expecting them to. It had been like this for years, me watching over him, tending to his smallest needs, while his eyes and heart always drifted towards someone else. The nurse came in, checking his vitals, asking him simple memory recall questions. Ethan responded with ease. He remembered his childhood home, his college years, even the minor details of his favorite coffee shop near his office. But when she asked about his wife, about me, he only frowned, his brows furrowing in confusion. "Sophia Carter?" the nurse prompted, glancing at the clipboard. Ethan hesitated, looking at me for the first time since waking up. His eyes held no recognition. I don't remember her," he finally admitted. Madeline let out a small gasp, squeezing his hand. "Ethan, don't push yourself too hard," she whispered, her voice trembling. The nurse turned to me with a sympathetic smile, but it only made the emptiness inside me feel heavier. I placed the bowl of soup on the table beside his bed. "You should eat something," I said softly. "The doctor said you need nutrition." Ethan nodded absently, his focus still on Madeline. "Maddie, were you here the whole time?" She nodded through her tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't leave you." I turned away, staring at the window. There was no place for me in this room. The doctor explained to me that Ethan's memory loss was selective, likely due to the trauma he had suffered. In cases like this, memories tied to strong emotions are usually the ones retained, he said. Strong emotions. So Ethan had strong emotions for everyone except me. I thanked the doctor and walked back to the hospital room, my hands gripping the divorce papers I had been carrying in my bag for weeks. Ethan had wanted a divorce before the accident. It wasn't a heated fight, not a dramatic betrayal, just cold indifference, the slow erosion of a marriage that was never truly built on love. Now, standing outside his hospital room, I wondered if this was the perfect opportunity. Maybe fate had given me an easy way out. But when I pushed open the door, the sight of him staring at Madeline with such devotion made something inside me tighten. I couldn't leave. Not yet. The first few days after the accident were the hardest. Ethan treated me like a distant acquaintance, someone he was polite to but felt no connection with. He relied on Madeline's presence more than anyone else's, asking her about their shared past, their old memories together. I would stand by his bed, listening as they laughed over stories I was never a part of. "Do you remember our trip to the lake house?" Madeline asked one afternoon, her fingers idly playing with the edge of his hospital blanket. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, I remember the bonfire and you making fun of me for burning the marshmallows." I turned away, busying myself with adjusting the pillows on the couch. That was our lake house. Ethan and I had spent summers there after we got married, but the only memory that remained in his mind was her presence, not mine. One evening when Ethan was resting, Madeline pulled me aside. "Sophia," she began hesitantly, guilt flickering in her eyes, "he doesn't remember you. Maybe it's a sign." I knew what she was saying. She wanted me to let him go. I stared at her for a long moment, then simply smiled. "Ethan and I are still married," I reminded her, "for now." A week after the accident, Ethan was finally discharged. I had packed a small bag of essentials for him, making sure his favorite sweatshirts were included. He barely glanced at them as he got dressed. We left the hospital together, but it didn't feel like we were going home. It felt like I was taking a stranger back to a place that held no meaning for him. The car ride was silent. Ethan stared out the window, deep in thought. I knew he wasn't thinking about me. I finally spoke, my voice calm. The doctor said your memory might come back gradually. Ethan shrugged, still not looking at me. I don't know if I want it to. Something inside me shattered. I didn't respond. What was the point? When we reached our house, Ethan paused at the doorway, scanning the space as if he were stepping into a stranger's home. I had spent years turning this house into something warm, something comforting, yet now it meant nothing to him. "I'll sleep in the guest room," he said, his tone neutral. I nodded, okay. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing for the first time that I was completely alone in my marriage. And maybe I had been alone for a long time. The next morning, as I watched Ethan sip the coffee I had made for him, his favorite blend, still prepared exactly how he liked it, I realized something. He didn't need me anymore. He had already let go of me, even before the accident. Maybe now it was time for me to do the same. I quietly walked to my desk, pulled out the divorce papers, and set them on the coffee table. I didn't say anything. I just waited. And for the first time since his accident, Ethan finally looked at me. Ethan Carter came home from the hospital, but it no longer felt like home, at least not for him. From the moment we stepped inside, I could tell that he didn't recognize this place as his own. His eyes scanned the living room, the neatly arranged bookshelves, the framed wedding photos on the wall, each detail carefully put together over the years, but none of it sparked even the faintest hint of familiarity. I watched as he hesitated in the doorway, his hand hovering near the light switch as if unsure where it was. "I'll sleep in the guest room," he said flatly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A dull ache spread through my chest. I had expected it, but hearing him say it still stung. I nodded. "Okay." And just like that, the distance between us grew even wider. Ethan barely spoke to me during the first few days at home. He wasn't rude, just detached, indifferent, as if I were nothing more than a polite stranger sharing the same space. Madeline, on the other hand, became his lifeline. He called her often, his voice warmer whenever he spoke to her. He asked her about their past, about things they used to do together. She never hesitated to fill in the gaps, reminding him of their inside jokes, their shared history, a history that never included me. Whenever I walked past the living room, I would hear him laugh softly over the phone. With me, he was quiet. With her, he was at ease. It was as if his heart remembered her, even if his mind did not. I still took care of him. It wasn't out of obligation, nor was it because I thought it would make him remember me. It was simply habit, the same way I had always cared for him, even when he never noticed. I made sure he had his medication on time. I cooked his favorite meals, even though he no longer recognized them as such. And each time, he would accept them with a simple nod of thanks, never questioning why I knew exactly how he liked his coffee, why I always adjusted the thermostat before he woke up, why I always left an extra pillow on the couch for him. He never asked, and I never told him. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Even if he regained his memory, it wouldn't change the way he felt about me. One evening, after yet another silent dinner, Ethan put his fork down and looked at me. "Sophia." It was the first time he had said my name since we left the hospital. I glanced up from my plate. "Yeah?" He hesitated, his expression unreadable. "Did I marry you because I loved you?" The question hit me like a sudden gust of cold wind. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. His tone was calm, almost casual, as if he were simply confirming a forgotten fact, but I knew better. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on my chest. I set my fork down carefully, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. I could have lied. I could have told him yes, but lies had no place between us. Not anymore. So I met his gaze, forcing my voice to remain steady. "No," I said softly. "You didn't." A flicker of something indistinguishable crossed his face. "Then why did we get married?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Your family pressured you to settle down." Ethan frowned. "And you? Why did you marry me?" A small, bitter smile curved my lips. "Because I liked you." The room fell into a heavy silence. For the first time, Ethan really looked at me, not as the woman he had forgotten, not as a stranger in his home, but as someone who had once made a choice to love him, despite knowing he would never love her back. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. He didn't understand. Of course he didn't. And I wasn't sure I wanted him to. Because understanding would mean acknowledging what he had done to me, and Ethan Carter had never been the kind of man to look back on his mistakes. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat alone in the darkened living room, staring at the untouched divorce papers on the coffee table. I should have handed them to him. I should have walked away. But instead, I sat there, holding on to a past that no longer existed, waiting for a future that would never come. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Even if Ethan got his memory back, I would still be the one he forgot. Ethan spent more time on the phone with Madeline than he did speaking to me. His voice, once distant and indifferent, softened whenever he talked to her. I would pass by the living room, heading toward the kitchen, only to hear him chuckling at something she said. "I can't believe I forgot that," he murmured once, a nostalgic warmth in his tone. "You always used to say that," Madeline's voice floated through the speaker, light and teasing. I didn't stop to listen. I didn't need to. It didn't matter how much I tried to pretend I belonged in this house. The truth was clear. I was nothing more than a guest here. The house was silent between us. Ethan never asked me about our past. Never once turned to me with the same curiosity he did with Madeline. To him, she was a puzzle worth piecing together. I was a page already torn out of the book. I still made sure he had his medication. I still left his coffee by his side table in the morning. I still cooked meals, though he often ate them absent-mindedly, his focus elsewhere. I still loved him, but love meant nothing when it wasn't wanted. One afternoon, as I stood by the window watching the autumn leaves fall, I realized something painfully simple. I had spent years waiting for him to look at me the way he looked at her. I had spent years believing that if I stayed, if I loved him enough, he would see me. But he never did. Even when he had all his memories, he never truly saw me. Even now, with a blank slate, he still chose her over me. So why was I still here? I walked into our bedroom. No, not ours anymore. His. The room felt emptier than ever, even with all our shared possessions still inside. I pulled out a suitcase, the same one I had used when we went on our honeymoon. The irony was almost laughable. Slowly I began folding my clothes, placing them neatly inside. I took only the essentials, enough to leave without looking back. As I zipped up the bag, my eyes landed on the bookshelf across the room. There, sitting between two forgotten novels, was my old journal. I hesitated. Then, as if drawn by some invisible force, I reached for it. The leather cover was worn from years of use, the pages filled with memories that only I held on to. I turned to the first entry. October 16th, 2014. There was a guy playing the violin at the freshman welcome event today. He was breathtaking. His name is Ethan Carter. I think I have a crush on him. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. I flipped to another page. January 5th, 2016. Ethan doesn't notice me, but that don't have to. It's enough that I get to sit beside him in class, enough that I get to hear him talk about things he's passionate about. Maybe one day he'll look at me too. I kept turning pages. May 22nd, 2019. He proposed today. I know it's because of his family. I know it's not because he loves me. But when he looked at me and said, "Let's do this," I still said yes. because even if it's not real for him, it's real for me. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let them fall. I had spent years writing down a love story that never truly existed, and now it was time to end it. I walked to Ethan's office, placing the journal on his desk. Next to it, I set down the divorce papers. I had filled out everything except for his signature. No dramatic confrontation, no final pleas for him to remember me. Just silence, just the quiet acceptance that he was never mine to begin with. With one last glance around the room, I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the door. I didn't expect him to stop me. I didn't expect him to care enough to notice I was gone. And maybe that was the most painful part of all. The house was quiet, too quiet. Ethan Carter stood in the middle of his home. No, not his home. Their home. Their home, but it didn't feel ours anymore. It felt empty. The air was different. Something was missing. His fingers brushed against the surface of his desk, where two objects sat side by side, a leather-bound journal and a stack of papers with a single blank signature line at the bottom, a divorce agreement. His gaze flickered to the suitcase in the corner of the room. It wasn't there before. Sophia was gone. She had left without a word. And for some reason, that realization sent a strange uneasiness crawling through his chest. Ethan didn't touch the journal at first. He had more important things to think about, more important people to call. His fingers itched to reach for his phone, to dial Madeline's number. She would know what to say. She always did. But for some reason, he didn't call her. Instead, he stared at the leather-bound book, his name written in neat, cursive handwriting on the first page. Ethan Carter. Why had she left this for him? With a quiet exhale, he pushed it aside. It didn't matter. She didn't matter. Not to him. But then, 2 days later, as he was rifling through the drawers of his nightstand, looking for his watch, he found something else entirely. A small, faded envelope tucked beneath an old stack of paperwork. He pulled it out, his fingers hesitating for a brief moment before he turned it over. Inside was a photograph, a picture of a man and a woman standing at an altar, smiling, happy. Him and Sophia. Ethan frowned, staring at the image as a strange, unwelcome feeling settled in his stomach. I don't remember this. The man in the photo, him, had his arm wrapped securely around her waist. She was looking at him, her expression soft, her smile filled with something he couldn't quite name. And then there was him, looking at her, but not with indifference, with something else. Something he should have remembered, something he didn't. The next morning, Ethan met with his mother for breakfast at their usual cafe. He wasn't sure why he brought it up, the uneasiness in his chest, the picture he found, the wife he didn't remember losing. But before he could stop himself, the words were already spilling out. "Mom," he said, setting down his coffee cup. "What was my marriage like?" His mother gave him a long, careful look before placing her napkin beside her plate. "You really don't remember?" He shook his head. She sighed. "Sophia was always there, Ethan." That didn't answer his question. "That's not what I asked," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. His mother studied him for a long moment before she finally spoke. "You weren't always good to her," she admitted, "but she loved you, more than you ever deserved." Ethan's stomach tightened. "She was with you through everything. Every difficult moment, every challenge. She stood by your side even when you didn't see her, didn't appreciate her." Ethan looked down at his plate. "I never loved her, did I?" His mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "You never let yourself try." Over the next few days, Ethan started asking questions, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't stop himself. A conversation with his best friend, Ryan. "She was always waiting for you, man. You just never turned around." A conversation with his assistant, Claire. "You don't remember, do you? The way she used to bring you lunch to the office, how she stayed up late helping with your reports? She was always thinking about you." A conversation with Madeline. "Ethan, you've always known where your heart belonged. If it were really Sophia, wouldn't you have realized it before now? That should have been the end of it. That should have been the moment he closed the door on the past and moved on. But he couldn't. Because for the first time since the accident, he wasn't entirely sure if he had been right all along. That night he finally reached for the journal. His fingers brushed against the worn leather, his pulse unsteady as he opened it to the first page. He hadn't expected much, but as soon as his eyes landed on the words, his breath caught in his throat. October 16th, 2014. There was a guy playing the violin at the freshman welcome event today. He was breathtaking. His name is Ethan Carter. I think I have a crush on him. A sharp, foreign pain stabbed through his chest. He turned the page. January 5th, 2016. Ethan doesn't notice me, but that's okay. He doesn't have to. It's enough that I get to sit beside him in class, enough that I get to hear him talk about things he's passionate about. Maybe one day he'll look at me too. His fingers tightened around the pages, page after page. She had loved him. She had loved him so much, and he had never seen it. He had never once looked her way. Ethan closed the journal, his head spinning. His mind replayed every moment he could remember of her, the quiet way she had cared for him, the way she had never asked for anything in return, the way she had walked away without a single complaint, as if she had already expected it, as if she had always known that she was the one who loved more. A sick, heavy feeling settled in his stomach. Had he made a mistake? Had he spent years looking in the wrong direction? Had he already lost something he should have fought for? His eyes drifted toward the divorce papers on his desk. For the first time since the accident, the thought of signing them felt wrong. And Ethan Carter wasn't sure why. Ethan Carter had never been the type of man to dwell on the past, but now it haunted him. Ever since he opened Sophia's journal, the words inside it wouldn't leave his mind. She had loved him. Through every moment he had ignored her, every time he had walked past her without a second glance, she had been there, waiting for him to see her. And now she was gone. The house was too quiet without her presence. For the first time, Ethan noticed things he had never paid attention to before. The way the morning coffee wasn't sitting on his desk at exactly 7:30 a.m. anymore. The way his shirts weren't freshly pressed and hanging in the closet. The way his home, once warm in a way he had never fully understood, now felt empty. She had left without a word, and it shouldn't have bothered him. But for some reason, it did. The divorce papers had been sitting on his desk for days now. He had read them over more times than he cared to admit. It was a clean break, nothing messy, nothing bitter, as if she had already let go of him a long time ago. Why did that make his chest tighten? He had spent years believing that his heart belonged to someone else, that Sophia had been a mistake forced upon him by circumstance. Then why, when faced with the reality of losing her, did it feel like something inside him was coming undone? Why did it feel so wrong? That afternoon, Ethan found himself in their bedroom. His bedroom now. The closet door was slightly open. Something in his chest clenched when he saw her side was empty. Gone. All of her clothes, the small trinkets she used to keep on her dresser, the scent of her perfume that used to linger in the air, everything was gone. A strange, unfamiliar sense of panic settled inside him. He had spent years not noticing her presence. So why was her absence suddenly so unbearable? He didn't think. His body moved on instinct. Ethan rushed down the stairs, his heartbeat pounding louder than it should. When he reached the front door, he saw her. Sophia standing there with her suitcase, her fingers resting lightly on the handle. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She just looked tired, as if she had already said her goodbyes long before this moment. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Why did this feel wrong? His voice came out hoarse, almost uncertain. "Are you really going to leave?" Sophia looked up at him then. Her expression was calm, her eyes clear. But there was something else too, something final, something unshakable. She didn't hesitate. "You don't need me anymore." Ethan should have let her go. He should have accepted the freedom she was giving him, the clean break she had written into those divorce papers. But for some reason his chest tightened at her words. He didn't need her? Then why did it feel like he was losing something irreplaceable? Why did it feel like he had made the biggest mistake of his life? As he stood there, watching Sophia walk away, he realized something that sent a chill down his spine. For the first time since his accident, he wasn't sure if he wanted to forget anymore. For the first time in his life, he wondered, had he spent all these years loving the wrong person? Ethan Carter had always believed himself to be a rational man, but nothing about what he was doing now made sense. For days, he had ignored the divorce papers sitting on his desk. He had tried to convince himself that it was just habit, that he wasn't signing them because he had too many things to do. But the truth was simpler. He didn't want to. He didn't know why. He didn't know what had changed. But he knew one thing for certain. Letting Sophia go didn't feel right. Ethan had never been the type of man to chase after someone, yet now he found himself following Sophia around the house, trying to start conversations that she clearly didn't want to have. It was subtle at first. "Do you want me to help with that?" he asked one morning when she was preparing breakfast. Sophia barely glanced at him. "No, I've got it." Later that evening, when she reached for the coffee maker, he spoke again. "I can make it for you." She stopped for a moment, but then continued as if she hadn't heard him. She wasn't being cruel. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She was simply indifferent. And somehow that was worse. It wasn't until he started paying attention to the small things that Ethan realized just how much he had overlooked. The way Sophia always knew how he liked his coffee, adding just the right amount of sugar. The way she used to wait up for him whenever he worked late, even if he never acknowledged it. The way she had memorized all his habits, from the way he preferred his shirts ironed to the exact temperature he liked his showers. How had he never noticed? Had she always been this way? Had she always loved him this much? And if she had, why had he never seen it before? Ethan tried harder. He forced himself into her space, finding excuses to talk to her, to bring up their past. "Did we ever go on vacation together?" he asked one evening while she was sorting through old documents. Sophia barely looked up. "Yes." "Where?" She paused as if debating whether or not to answer. Finally, she said, "Italy." Ethan frowned. "I don't remember that." "You wouldn't," she murmured. "You spent most of the trip on the phone with Madeline." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to say something, to deny it, to defend himself, to say anything at all, but nothing came out, because he knew she was telling the truth. Ethan continued trying to reach her, but every attempt was met with quiet resistance. It was the way she never looked him in the eye for too long, the way she never lingered in the same room as him if she didn't have to, the way her voice no longer held warmth when she spoke to him. He was losing her. And for the first time he realized, maybe he had already lost her a long time ago. One night, after yet another failed attempt at conversation, Ethan finally said the words that had been weighing on his chest for days. "Sophia," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Can we talk?" She hesitated before setting down the book she was reading. He took that as a yes. Ethan exhaled slowly. I know I've never been good to you." Sophia said nothing. He clenched his fists. "But I want to fix it." For the first time in days, she truly looked at him, and what he saw in her eyes wasn't hope. It was sadness, and that scared him more than anything else. "You don't have to pretend, Ethan," she said quietly. His stomach twisted. "I'm not pretending." She smiled then. But it wasn't the kind of smile that made people feel warm inside. It was the kind that meant goodbye. "You loved Madeline," she whispered, "not me." And then she walked away, leaving Ethan standing in the middle of the room, drowning in a realization that had come far too late. The house was silent. Ethan Carter sat alone in his office, staring at the divorce papers still resting on his desk. He should have signed them by now. He had told himself that letting Sophia go was the logical choice, the right choice. Then why did he hesitate? Why did he feel like something inside him was slipping away, something he wasn't ready to lose? He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. His thoughts had been a mess for weeks. Ever since Sophia left, he felt like he had been trapped in a fog, like something important was just beyond his reach, something he had forgotten, something he wasn't sure he wanted to remember. Until now. It started as a flicker, a fleeting image, gone before he could grasp it. He was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, exhaustion pressing down on his chest, when a white dress, a veil, a pair of bright eyes filled with love. Sophia. Their wedding day. The memory hit him so suddenly, so violently, that he sat up straight, gasping for breath. And then, more flashes. Sophia laughing softly as he placed the ring on her finger. The way her fingers trembled when she whispered, "I do." The way she had looked at him that day, as if he was her entire world. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to focus, trying to hold on to the memories before they faded again. And then they came all at once, like a dam breaking. Suddenly, he was no longer in the present, he was drowning in the past. A rainy afternoon, Sophia standing in the kitchen, making him soup because he had a cold. He had barely looked at her, barely even thanked her. But she had smiled anyway. "I just want to take care of you," she had said. A late night in his office. Sophia arriving with dinner, placing a cup of coffee beside him, knowing exactly how he liked it. She had waited hours for him to finish his work. He hadn't even noticed when she fell asleep on the couch. Their anniversary. Sophia waiting at a restaurant, a small, hopeful smile on her lips. He had forgotten. He had been with Madeline. When he finally arrived, hours late, her smile had been smaller, sadder. But she hadn't said a word. She had never once asked for more than he was willing to give. The night he found her crying in the bedroom, he had asked, "What's wrong?" She had looked at him, her eyes filled with an exhaustion he hadn't understood at the time. But now he understood. Ethan's breathing was unsteady as he staggered to his feet. He had spent years believing that he had never loved Sophia, that she had been nothing more than an obligation, a duty forced upon him. But it had never been true, not once. He had loved her. He had just been too blind to see it. And now she was gone. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had to find her. He had to tell her. Ethan grabbed his keys, nearly tripping over himself as he rushed out the door. His mind was a blur as he drove, each streetlight passing like a hazy memory. By the time he reached the small apartment complex where Sophia had moved, his hands were shaking. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door opened, and there she was, Sophia, standing in the doorway, looking as calm as ever. But her eyes held nothing for him anymore. His chest tightened. "I remember," he breathed. Sophia blinked. "What?" "I remember now," he repeated, desperate, as if saying the words would make her believe him. "I remember everything." For the first time in weeks, he saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes. But it wasn't relief. It wasn't happiness. It was pain. And then she smiled. Not the smile he had seen on their wedding day. Not the soft, loving smiles she used to give him. But a sad smile. A resigned smile. And then she whispered the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "It doesn't change anything." Ethan felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It does. It has to." But Sophia only looked at him with the kind of sadness that comes from being broken for too long. She stepped back. "I spent so many years waiting for you to see me, Ethan," she said softly. "I loved you with everything I had." His throat tightened. But love isn't enough." She cut him off, her voice steady. "Not when it's too late." And then she did what he had never expected. She closed the door, leaving him standing there, alone, with nothing but the weight of every mistake he had ever made. Sophia Carter had always imagined what it would feel like to walk away from Ethan. For years, she had wondered if the day would ever come when she could finally let go, when her heart would no longer tighten at the thought of him, when she could finally stop hoping for something that would never be. Now that moment had arrived, and it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like grief. But grief was better than staying trapped in a love that had only ever existed on her side of the story. So this time, she was leaving for real. Ethan showed up at her door again the next morning. Sophia wasn't surprised. She had expected this. But what she hadn't expected was the look on his face. For the first time in all the years she had known him, Ethan Carter looked afraid. Not angry, not confused, just afraid. As if he had only just realized that he was about to lose something he could never get back. "Don't do this," he said, his voice low, unsteady. "Don't leave." Sophia exhaled slowly. She had spent too many years hearing those words in her head, imagining what it would feel like if Ethan ever asked her to stay. She had dreamed about this moment more times than she could count. But now that it was finally here, it didn't matter anymore. Ethan stepped inside before she could tell him not to. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he started, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "But I'll do whatever it takes, Sophia. I'll fix this." Sophia laughed softly, shaking her head. Not because she found it funny, but because she had spent years waiting for these words, and now they meant nothing. "There's nothing left to fix, Ethan," she said quietly. His jaw tightened. "That's not true." "It is. I remember everything now." Sophia's expression didn't change. "Good." Ethan took a step closer. "You loved me once." Her eyes darkened with something unreadable. "Yes, I did. Then let me make it right." Sophia looked at him for a long, quiet moment, and then, softly, so softly that he almost didn't hear it, she said, "We spent too many years being wrong for each other." Ethan froze. Sophia took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Now it's time for me to be right for myself." And then, without hesitation, without looking back, she picked up her suitcase and walked past him. For the first time, Ethan didn't try to stop her. Not because he didn't want to, but because he finally understood. She had spent so many years waiting for him to choose her, and now that he finally had, she had already learned how to live without him. Ethan watched as she stepped outside, her figure growing smaller with every second. His chest ached, but he didn't chase her. Because for the first time he knew she wasn't coming back, and this time it was his turn to be the one left behind. A year had passed. Ethan Carter didn't count the days anymore. He had once believed that time could fix anything, that if he waited long enough, if he gave himself the space to breathe, the ache in his chest would eventually disappear. But time didn't erase everything. Some losses stayed with you, some mistakes never stopped hurting, and some people never came back. It was a cold afternoon when Ethan saw her again. He hadn't been looking for her, hadn't expected to ever cross paths with her again. But as he stepped into the small coffee shop on the corner of Fifth Avenue, his breath caught in his throat. Sophia. She was sitting by the window, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, her dark hair falling softly over her shoulders. She was smiling, but not at him, at someone else. A man sat across from her, leaning in slightly as he spoke, his expression warm, his eyes full of something Ethan recognized all too well. It was the way Sophia had once looked at him, the way she had looked at him for years before he had ruined everything, and for the first time Ethan truly understood. She had moved on. Ethan stood there, frozen in place. Part of him wanted to step forward, to say her name, to see if she would turn to him with that same familiar softness, the way she used to. But something inside him whispered the truth. She wouldn't. Not anymore. Because Sophia wasn't waiting for him anymore. She wasn't his anymore, and for the first time, he made the right choice. He let her go. Ethan turned away from the coffee shop, his footsteps slow, his hands clenched in his pockets. The ache in his chest was still there. It probably always would be. But as he walked down the street, away from the woman he had once been too blind to love, he whispered to himself, "I hope she's happy." And this time, he really meant it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.